You know, another economic myth is one that you expose in the new edition of your book, Discrimination and Disparities, that all disparities, economic disparities in our economy, et cetera, are due to discrimination, that's the sole course, and therefore they have to be addressed by economic policies. The most recent fad is reparations for slavery. How do you respond to that?
Well, this is one of any number of one-factor explanations as to why everyone doesn't have the same outcome. 100 years ago, it was genetics. At other times and places, it was exploitation. But again, these are ideas that sound plausible. But when you do research, you discover that everywhere you turn, there are 1,000 reasons why people don't turn out the same. It goes right down to the family. In the first chapter of this book, I point out that the firstborn has higher IQs than his siblings, and in later life has more achievements. Among astronauts, for example, of the 29 astronauts in the Apollo program that put a man on the moon, 22 were either the firstborn or an only child. Now, if you can't get equality among people born to the same parents and raised under the same roof, why in the world would you think you're going to get it among people who've had such different histories and cultures around the world?
And yet, you know, you continue to hear politicians using statistics, sort of cherry-picking statistics in order to form economic policies where the government gets directly involved. They always do it under the guise of social justice. It seems like anything that is led by the phrase social justice can be accepted by these people.
Yes, and I guess one of the crucial assumptions of the social justice literature is that in the absence of bias, people would be similar, but they're not similar. They're not demographically similar. I mean, for example, the median age of Jewish Americans, Mormons, and Japanese Americans is around 50. There's no way they're going to be equally represented in proportion to their proportion of the society in the National Football League. I mean, 50-year-olds are not going to be able to compete with people in their 20s.
Well, they seem to cut a break for sports teams, but when it comes down to the general housing market, for example, various policies have been specifically oriented towards the use of statistics to show that, in fact, more black people are denied mortgages than white people, et cetera. I mean, they cherry-pick statistics to try to push social policies where the government gets involved needlessly.
Yes, well, that's one of the fallacies that I show up in my book, that if you look at the average credit score of people of different ethnic backgrounds, you'll discover that the order in which they rank by credit score is also the order in which they rank by acceptance for the highest quality mortgages.
Now,
that is, whites, for example, are turned down far more than Asian Americans.
Why is this misused? Is it because so often these statistics, in order to force these economic policies that don't work, is it because politicians extend their term in office? Is it because of the poverty industry, if you will, that exists? What do you think motivates people to do these things that clearly are not benefiting our society or our economy?
Well, these are things that are benefiting them. Politicians stay in office by saying things that people want to hear and by not accepting evidence that shows that they've gone wrong.
You know, another thing that politicians love to throw out there is the wealth tax, is that there are too many wealthy people that in order to redistribute income, we don't want to take away all wealthy people. We don't want to bring back the guillotine, but we need a wealth tax in order to cut into some of their riches. What do you think of that?
Well, I think that's one of the biggest fallacies, because the most fundamental kind of wealth is human capital, which is inside people's heads, and you can't confiscate that. Any number of countries have forced people out of the country. They've expelled them or driven them out and wouldn't let them take their wealth with them. And when they did that in Uganda, for example, the Ugandan economy collapsed. The Asians who arrived destitute in Britain, you know, within a number of years, they were prosperous again, whereas the Ugandan economy never recovered. If you can't confiscate the most fundamental wealth. It doesn't. The case for doing it means nothing if you can't do it.
Professor, I used to love reading your column every week, and one thing that is less economic and it's more social that's been happening recently is the discourse, particularly throwing around terms, very, very harsh terms like calling people racist as a sort of a go-to place, particularly for liberals against this administration. We heard it last week. Michael Cohen's testimony in front of Congress. He started out by saying what a racist President Trump is. What would you say about that, particularly with regard to President Trump? Do you consider him to be a racist?
I don't know enough about the man to know what he is, but I would like to see any such accusation accompanied by something that we can test against facts.
Well, you certainly have heard the charge anti-Semitism against him, despite the fact that his daughter is a convert to Judaism, his son-in-law is a Jew, their children are being raised in the Jewish tradition. Kind of hard to make the case, and yet you still hear it.
Well, if people have never heard those things because the media filters out things that go against what they believe, then the charge can stick no matter what the facts may happen to be.
Professor, I almost hate to ask this question because you're so honest about things. You see things straight on. The future of America. I mean, do you think that we are destined to go through a period of socialism, a period where these ideas that have not worked, no matter where they've been tried, and certainly wouldn't work here, will be tried here and could bring down our country?
Well, the predictions of economists do not encourage me to go far in that direction. But I do have a great fear that in the long run, we may not make it. And I hate to say that, but and the one thing that keeps me from being despairing is of course, we don't know. There's so many things we can't possibly know. And so we may make it, but I wouldn't bet on it.
Thomas Sowell, you really are a great economist and a treasure for the United States of America. We appreciate you coming on. We wish you the very best of luck. Your newest, biggest edition of Discrimination and Disparities can be got at the bookstores or on Amazon right now. Thank you very much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.